HDMI, DisplayPort, USB-C. You just got a new monitor, but which one do you use to hook it up? Let's talk about it. Hello and welcome back to Gears and Tech. You just got a brand new cutting edge monitor and you're wondering what's the best way to hook it up. After all, most monitors support all three connection methods. So what are you giving up when you pick one over the other? And ultimately, what is the best connection that you can have from your high-end gaming PC to your brand new monitor? We're going to cover that all right now. Starting with DisplayPort. Now, in the most recent years, DisplayPort was kind of the de facto standard. It was the one that if you had DisplayPort options on your monitor, that was the one that you picked. And that was largely due to the superior video quality options for transfer rate and for syncing up your video card to your monitor. Is that still true though? Is HDMI the better way to go, or is USB-C the best option nowadays? Now, since DisplayPort has been so popular, it's largely because it actually was the best. If you were curious about what should I use, DisplayPort was usually the answer. And a quick look at most GPUs, even the most current ones with tons of DisplayPort options and only one or two HDMI options, one could really assume that DisplayPort was the best way to roll forward. After all, it has the most ports. So let's go through some of the specs that DisplayPort has to offer and then see if maybe HDMI is ready to take over and become the de facto standard. To start off with, DisplayPort 2.1 can handle up to 80 gigabits per second of data transfer. That's a lot of visual information that transfers directly to the monitor, supporting the highest resolutions as well as the highest frame rates. Up until the NVIDIA RTX 50 series, which just released in 2025, NVIDIA was using the DisplayPort 1.4a standard. This standard capped out at 32.4 gigabits per second, which is plenty enough for 8K resolution at 60 frames per second in true 10-bit color. But that was only with display stream compression. When you weren't using display stream compression, you were restricted down to performance that was more similar to HDMI 2.1 with support for 4K at 120 frames per second, 8-bit, even though 10-bit performance caps out at 4K 90 Hz. Now, DisplayPort 2.1b standard is finally trickling down to consumers, and it offers up to 320 Hz at a 4K resolution in 8-bit color, or 240 Hz at 4K in 10-bit color. Another nice thing about DisplayPort is you can actually connect up to two monitors via daisy chaining. That means one cable goes from the GPU to the monitor, and then one cable goes from that monitor to a second monitor. Obviously, the monitor needs to support it and your video card needs to support it, but it can keep cable management under a lot better control with that option. And if you wanted to make use of NVIDIA's G-Sync and AMD's FreeSync or VRR, you would have to use a DisplayPort connector. Now, DisplayPort 1.4a onwards, so including 2.1b, supports dynamic metadata for HDR content, which means Dolby Vision and HDR10 Plus support, which brings wider brightness and color gamut, and your monitor is actually going to become the limiting factor here. So the cable supports it, but if the monitor doesn't support it, it's not going to do you any good anyway. Now, unlike HDMI, DisplayPort lacks the ability to support like Ethernet over the cable, and that's mostly because DisplayPort's primary purpose is exactly what it says in the name, DisplayPort. It's just transferring video data. So it's not really that widely used on like televisions, gaming consoles, or really anything once you go outside of the computer space. And that's why a lot of people tend to lean more to HDMI. It's what we know, it's what we're familiar with, and we mostly think, well, HDMI is probably the superior option. So why don't we talk about HDMI? Now, HDMI stands for High Definition Multimedia Interface. As we said, it's the most common connection method for a lot of like AV receivers, TVs, gaming systems, all that stuff. It is very, very convenient, and it has the ability to transfer audio, Ethernet, and video signals over the entire cable. And the HDMI format can actually support power transmission over the cable, even though it's a feature that's not very often utilized. One of the main advantages of HDMI is it is hot swappable. You can plug it in, unplug it, and replug it back in again, and it has the ability to sync up whatever device you're connecting, which makes it very consumer friendly, which is one of the reasons you probably have seen it on your TV system and your gaming system, because most people don't want to be tech experts to try to figure out how to make the connection and then power cycle the machines and all of that. They just want to plug it in and see it show up on their TV screen. Now, HDMI 2.1 is the current standard that is adopted by device manufacturers, supporting a throughput of 48 gigabits per second, which is plenty enough to drive a 10K display at 60 frames per second. Now, keep in mind, because we're talking about most consumer devices, TVs and stuff, 10K at 60 frames per second, we're not even there yet. And when we are, probably the next standard of HDMI will be more widely adopted anyway. So for those of us running 1080p, which a lot of us still are, or 4K, there's plenty of bandwidth capable on that HDMI connection. So we're not worrying about capping out the data line on our HDMI cable. Now, just like our DisplayPort, HDMI 2.1 does have the ability to use FreeSync and VRR, which enables variable refresh rate support, and it locks the refresh rate to the monitor and the frame rate of the output of the device, so it eliminates screen tearing, especially for the gamers, which is why you're here. How do I hook up this high-end gaming monitor? And so far, not a lot of answers, just a lot of specs. And I know you're wondering, Anton, when are you going to tell me what cable should I use? Well, we're getting there. First, we need to understand the specs and what it's capable of so that we know how we're making the right decision. So bear with me, it's coming up. Now, we just talked about HDMI 2.1, which is very capable, but many older monitors will actually only support HDMI 2.0B, and that would be a limiting factor which restricts you down to 4K resolution at 60 frames per second in 8-bit color. You'll also be limited to 44.1 kilohertz and 16-bit pass-through audio with only 2 uncompressed channels. Bear in mind, 5.1 surround sound is actually a compressed channel, so we can transfer compressed audio over that same HDMI cable. Most gamers aren't too worried about the audio transfer characteristics, but for those of us who are connecting up our home audio equipment and our TV, these are some specs that are very important to know. For the gamers though, HDMI 2.0 does not support the FreeSync standard, and HDR content is limited to static metadata. The HDR10 standard compared to 2.1, which supports dynamic metadata, including HDR10 and Dolby Vision. Older HDMI 2.0 4K monitors will save you some money, but you're also going to lose out on some features. So if you are shopping for a new monitor, you haven't got it yet, make sure it supports HDMI 2.1. Now, when we talked about our PlayStation 5, we did talk a little bit about cabling and making sure that we're connecting the right cable to our PlayStation, because as you might have guessed, an HDMI 2.0 cable will not support HDMI 2.1, so suddenly the cable also matters. If you are rocking a 4K monitor with HDMI 2.1 support, you are very unlikely to hit any serious bottlenecks at this stage, and as long as we're sure that this cable is an HDMI 2.1 compliant cable, we should be plenty good. But if you're not using a 2.1 cable, you're probably actually downgrading your monitor even though you paid for these extra features. So make sure that you're getting that 2.1 cable, high quality 2.1. Those ones that are cheap on Amazon probably aren't actually hitting that 2.1 standard, which could become a problem, especially, I mean, you've got this high-end gaming system, you've got this high-end monitor, don't cheap out on the cable. But we'll put links to cables in the description that definitely hit that standard if you're curious about which one should I definitely get or which one should I avoid. Now that finally brings us to USB-C. Now, most of us know USB-C as the charger cable for our phones, but USB-C is so much more than that. This handy little cable can do a ton of stuff, including transfer digital video signals from one device to another, including a display monitor and or a TV. Now, the ability to carry a display signal over USB-C, it relies on a technology called USB-C alt mode. And this is essentially just DisplayPort over USB-C. So suddenly you understand, okay, DisplayPort sounded pretty good. USB-C with alt mode all of a sudden is the same as long as your device supports it. So who's using the USB-C connection. In a nutshell, laptop users, that's who's using USB-C. But let's just cover some of the specs real quick, just to make sure we've got it all covered off here. In alt mode, we are basically getting the same specs as DisplayPort 1.4. So as you recall, this is theoretically possible to get an 8K signal at up to 60 frames per second with 10-bit color, or an uncompressed 4K 8-bit signal at 120 frames per second. That's our USB-C using that alt mode, which you don't have to do anything to use alt mode. You just plug it in and it'll play the video onto the device. So it's magic. It's truly magical. One of the main reasons why you might want to use USB-C is it is dead easy to use. The ports are everywhere. I've got them on this laptop. I've got them on my phone. You've got them all around the house for pretty much everything. Even my coffee maker has a USB-C on it. One of the other main advantages of the USB-C alt mode is the USB-C cable also has the ability to transfer power over the USB-C. Enough power to actually charge a laptop, for example. So I could connect this to my monitor, plug this into my laptop, and it is the only connection that I need on my laptop to display on the monitor, and it charges the laptop. Now you do need to do a little bit of research if you're planning to use that connection method, that the monitor itself actually handles the power delivery required for the laptop. My personal laptop is looking for 120 watts of power. That's not typical for a monitor to supply that much power. Usually you're going to be 60, 80, or 100 watts of power, which is plenty to charge in a low power state. But if I'm using it as a gaming laptop, it does need all 120 watts to power everything on that laptop and get that gaming performance. So suddenly USB-C might not be what you're looking for in those gaming scenarios. So where is USB-C mostly going to be used? It's for the productivity guys, the guys who are plugging a laptop in, doing some spreadsheets, checking your emails, maybe watching a couple YouTube videos while you're supposed to be working, but that's about it. It's not currently really spec'd out for our high-end gamers. So right off the bat, USB-C is probably not what we're using. Now there are some fringe outliers there where USB-C suddenly becomes what you're looking for, and that would be our mobile gamers. Those of you who have a handheld portable gaming device of some sort, and then this becomes really the only way that you're going to connect that to a monitor, and in that case your choice is already made for you. You're using the USB-C anyway, so you're probably not watching this video wondering, how am I going to get a DisplayPort connected up to this handheld gaming device? The good news is it doesn't matter, because as we already discussed, DisplayPort and USB-C are basically the same standard, just a different connector end. Now that brings us to which one is right for you. Now that's going to largely depend on what you're trying to achieve with the connection method that you're using. Since HDMI 2.1 is already fully on the market and it provides enough throughput for 8K at 60 Hz, the cables are cheap and plentiful, it might be the option that you're going to choose. DisplayPort 2.1 is a solid choice if you have the hardware, and especially if daisy chaining is a solution that you're going to need to use, because that's the only one that's supporting it. USB-C does actually too, kind of, sort of, but we didn't really talk about that. So for our purposes, DisplayPort is the only one that's going to support daisy chaining. So really, the answer is simple. It's between these two, and it ultimately depends on if you've got the right cable, and you're sure you do. If you have the HDMI 2.1B cable and your monitor supports it, that's the way that I would go. If I'm not too sure about what my monitor supports and or how good the quality of this cable is, like this cable right here, this one says TELUS on it. It is likely not a 2.1 cable, but I don't know for sure. So it's a lot better for me to take my DisplayPort cable and use that. And DisplayPort does not have any bottlenecks. It has been the favorite for a lot of years anyway, and DisplayPort is a great option for many years to come. So if I had to pick one, DisplayPort is the safest when you're not sure. HDMI is a great option if you're positive that you've matched everything appropriately. You've got the right video card that supports the highest standard, you've got the cable that supports the highest standard, and your monitor supports the highest standard. But ultimately, you really can't go wrong with either of those two. Now's the part in the video where I ask you guys the questions. Let us know, what standard are you using? Did I miss anything in the specs while we were reviewing this? And is there something that maybe we missed out? I mean, I can cover that in a future video, or I always participate in the chat as well. If you're interested in picking up cables or any other devices that we've kind of talked about through this video, always I'll put links in the description where I'll recommend ones that I would use for myself. But hopefully that helps you make your decision a little bit easier. Hey, thanks for watching all the way to the end of this video. We hope you enjoy the content in this video, and we'd love to have you come back. Consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And for those subscribers who are looking for that extra special thing that you can do to support this channel, consider joining our members group. That's where we're building this community, the Gears and Tech community, where we can all enjoy content together. You'll get special perks, which we'd love for you to check out by clicking the link down below. For those of you who are just happy to watch the video, that's okay too. You can check out some of our other content right over here, where we've got some previous videos that have already been uploaded and enjoyed by many of our viewers already. We do hope to see you again. This has been Gears and Tech. Have a great day.